You're live.
Thank you. Good evening. It's 5 p.m. on Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. It's a special city council meeting from the City of Isle of Palms workshop. Called the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, we have citizens' comments?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Special presentations, none. We go on to dashboard of city operations and short-term rental report.
Yes, in your package, you have your dashboards that, that show that generally things are trending as they typically do. We do have a number of vacancies in the city. City Hall has financial analysts. Obviously, there's also the deputy city administrator. In that department, we have 3 officers and 1 code enforcement officer. I think that we have a conditional offer out to 1 or 2 of those.
We have 1 vacancy going into the month.
Okay, so
And that would be a police officer?
that's correct.
Correct.
Yeah. Firefighters, we have 2 vacancies. Public Works, we have created a vacancy this month. So in the process of hiring each of those.
Just a curious question, on the building permits are, looks like we've only got 8, but the value is way up, or do we have a couple of really large projects going on, or?
Not, I can't recall one, do we have, usually,
There is Wild Dunes, I think, has a big project going on. And
okay.
I don't remember exactly what it is, but.
Yeah, that value per project
That's
is
way
very
up,
high, yeah.
It's like 6, 7 million, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's 1 or 2 big ones or what's going on there.
The golf course would be 20 million for the Wild Dunes. Would that be one of them?
I think it is one. I feel confident that it's Wild Dunes, but I don't remember
Which one it is.
project it was.
Okay.
That may be it.
Oh, yeah, this does say new homes permitted. So these
Check into that.
are like, yeah, $7 million homes, yeah.
Yeah, I think that-
Maybe you can get back to us on that.
Yeah,
one.
the golf
I'll
course
check-
out of
I'll
it.
check that. On your short-term rental dashboard, we are at the end of the year. You will recall and that these licenses will expire at the end of April. So we'll start the process completely over at the end of this month, start back building up for the year. But you can kind of see year over year, we're kind of ending the year relatively flat.
Yeah, Douglas, you'd mentioned you were doing some cleansing of the database or something to kind of make it more apple, or
Yes,
some
well-
other false ones, or something's
Yeah,
growing.
we are actively pursuing licenses that when a property gets sold, we're monitoring for that and pulling them out of the system. So we are kind of lowering the number by doing that.
And Rentalscape's comfortable that we've got everybody that should have a license has a license, so that's working
Yeah,
like
they-
it's supposed to work? or-
Yep, yeah, they do pop up. I mean, we're always kind of chasing
Whack-a-mole.
1 or 2, yeah, kind of 1 or 2 that we're chasing. But it's working well. That's been a good tool for them to monitor short-term rentals.
But overall, it's slightly down,
Yeah, I
ever
mean,
so slightly.
yeah, I would say that's probably as a result of actively pulling them off when they change hands, which we didn't used to do.
Okay.
But yeah. Next, Deborah, you want to come up, and we wanted to go through, and I've asked Deborah, since we do have the review of the budget, draft 3, in this part of the agenda, that she would just hit the very highlights of the financial statements and project worksheets. I don't think there's been a lot of activity there. And spend the majority of this session on the reviewing draft 3 of the budget. I just skipped over departmental reports. They're in your packets. Sorry about that. Any questions there? Anything that you saw that jumped out at you?
Okay. As far as the March financials, we're still tracking very well for we've covered 9 months now and only have 3 more to go, so everything is still lining up with the percentages of where we should be. All the forecasts have been updated, and we're still looking like we will be projecting higher than we anticipated or budgeted for FY '25. The one thing that I do want to point out is we did receive the settlement check for $1.1 million we did apply that to the Beach Preservation Fund. Our cash balance is $3 million because that check came in before we could transfer it out to the investment account. And that balance is also high because most of our lease payments are due, or debt service payments are due in March.
Was
So
that
there's-
I'm sorry, the Airbnb settlement?
Yes,
Is that what
sir.
it was? Yeah.
That's what it was, yes, sir. Those are the things that I want to point out. Everything else is in your packet, and as you review it or have reviewed it, and you have any questions, just let me know. But I would like to spend the majority of the time on the budget.
I just have
Yes, ma'am.
one quick question. Under revenues, where do we show the income from parking?
Under the general fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question on that. It looks like we've only got a couple of months left, but we've only got 32% of the projected revenue, or the budgeted revenues. And I'm thinking that if we've only got April, May, and June left, which is really not high season, are we just behind on that, or is there something, I might be missing something on that, but it seems like we should be further along because we would have had last year's parking in there.
Right, well, we're always a month behind on parking because they do not submit it until the 20th of the month, so it's always 1 month behind. But April, May, and June should be high months. But yes, the other months from July on are already included in the parking. But remember.
this year's.
In this year's, yeah, in those numbers. But remember, we only received 76% of the total parking.
Right, but and I thought I thought we'd been tracking even with the fees, that we were tracking close to where we were.
We only record 76% of the total,
Yeah,
the
I'm just
others.
trying to understand, we've only got 3 months left, but we're 78%
Yeah, and
of the revenue still needs to come in to hit our target.
that's not right.
78%,
I mean, 68%, yeah, sorry.
where do you get to 68?
32 minus 100, 68.
Yeah.
If you look at the,
Yeah, but the percentage of the budget's at 72, revenue side.
on the parking line, Jimmy, see where it
Right.
says, yeah, it's 32%, we're 32% of budget.
Yeah, I got that. But it's a month behind, and
And we're not receiving any right now, but those,
Good news is we're above in some other categories, but just looks like we're lagging there.
right, and then last year, we didn't, parking, I think, was comparable to what the city collected for, when the city controlled the parking. Let me just take a look right quick.
I think it was up to $1.6 million before we hired.
Right, but it was, I think, maybe
Yeah, 1.5. Yeah, 1.4, 1.5-ish.
Yeah,
I think the
last
lot
year.
was 700 and meters were 700 and something.
And then I think we budgeted even less this year than we did the previous year.
It should be 74% of it, right?
Anyway, I guess we can take a look at it
Yeah,
next month, but.
I'll review that.
it's timing. There was 4 months with like no revenues.
That you're right, yeah, we should show more parking revenue.
We will.
Now, that number, I'll take a look at it, but the number has changed. That number is now, the city is now receiving 66% instead of 76%. So even though parking did increase, the rates increased, the amount that we're paying out is less. So we're showing more in citations than we are in actual parking.
And that would be
That's mixed in with the other.
all other?
All other.
Yes.
Okay, maybe that's the difference.
And do all
Yeah,
the
'cause-
licenses and, all the licenses, where it says other licenses, that all comes in like in the first April, May, June time?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
That's
That's
what I saw.
always later in the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, those licenses used to be January 31st, but several years ago, we had that changed because of cash flow concerns for the businesses. So now, most of them are April 30th.
Okay, I want to go ahead and talk about the budget if you
Are we going to
don't,
skip the project sheets?
unless you have a
Yeah,
specific question.
I did have one question on the shoal management project. And I think that, where did that settled in, Douglas? Right around 800,000 or so?
Total of 780. Yeah, 780 was the total excluding design and administration.
Okay, and that's where I was going to ask the question. It looks like, are we spending like 225,000 on the engineering and design, and then we've got another 136,000 for the monitoring? So
The
that's
administration.
So the total project's really going to be like, it's $1,150,000, I think. And we pay all of the engineering, the 225, and we're going to pay all the monitoring, 136.
Correct. And then of the 780, so we pay all of it except for 600,000 contributed by the community association.
Okay. All right. That was it.
Okay, are there any additional questions on March? Okay, I want to look at your page 52 of the packet to cover the changes that were in draft 2 versus draft 3. The first change was, council asked that we go ahead and incorporate the, where we could increase the fees. So we increased business licenses, business permits, building permits, and short-term rental licenses. And those are baked into this budget. And with that change for business licenses and also increasing the, I think that we had 94% to 95%, that's an additional $409,000. The building permits is an additional $85,000, and the short-term rental will be $280,000. We, now, for parking, I reached out to PCI and asked them to give us their projected forecast for the city. And with that 66% change, even with the rates increasing, what we were budgeting initially for lot has decreased by $100,000. And what we were projecting for meter has decreased by $98,000. But the line below is for citations, our citations increased by $219,000. Also, based on the numbers, the forecast, the parking should be $5,919,000 more than what we budgeted. But we'll take another look at that to make sure that what we have on this sheet is correct.
Is it fair to say that we're not going to necessarily generate more money from citations? It's just that the split is now coming into, it's a shift of where the revenue
That's
and the
correct.
fees are. So I don't think
We're retaining all of the citation revenue, which we used to share.
yeah.
Right.
We're not generating a lot more tickets, I guess.
That's correct.
So the citations for this year changed the forecast. That increased $77,000, which, increases the fund balance. We increased the marina variable income for the additional rent, and that added $278,000 to the budget and fund balance. The expenses, we were asked to cut expenses where we could. We did look with each department to see what we could generate, and each department head individually said that they really didn't have anywhere that they could cut. The budgets that they do present for the city are essentials that are needed for the city. There aren't any fluff buried into the budget, so there was very little to cut. But in doing so and looking through our projections, we unfortunately had to add some costs. So, we had to add $7,000 for some emergency beach access signage that will need to be replaced because the ones that are, I think, under the dock are kind of worn out and need to be replaced. In my changes to draft 2, I unfortunately removed the high water vehicle, but did not add back the rescue boat. And the committee said that the fire department could get one or the other. The high water vehicle was delayed, so the boat should have stayed, with the caveat that they will receive a grant for that. If they don't receive the grant, then of course we won't purchase the boat.
So is the grant revenue in here? In the budget?
No, there's no grant money because this is just our cost. The $300,000 would just be our cost.
But if we're not going to do it unless we get the grant revenue, shouldn't we have both sides of in here?
So the net effect could still be $300,000.
That would be zero.
No. So the grant, the cost of this boat is $1.2 million, I
So you're saying
believe.
300,000 of it. It's going to only cover 300,000 of it.
That's correct. That's correct.
But the grant, none of the grant funds are.
No,
in
the
revenue?
grant, neither the full cost is in here. So I could put whatever the cost of the boat is, and then recognize the 75% for the grant, it's still gonna net to $300,000. I mean, I can show both sides, but
Yeah, I'm just confused because I thought you said that if we didn't get the grant, we weren't doing the boat. But we are going to do the boat even if we don't get the grant?
no. If we don't get the grant, we're not gonna do the boat. So we're putting the cost in there with the anticipation that we will get the grant. If we don't get the grant, we won't spend the $300,000.
We're anticipating we will get the grant.
That's correct.
So we've got that in as a placeholder.
Post-grant outlay from the city, right?
I thought the caveat was, the 300,000 is in there for the boat if we get the grant. If we don't get the grant, the $300,000 will buy a high water vehicle instead.
No, that would just be a savings for that year's budget, because the council decided to defer that high water vehicle.
To put it another way, the
Okay.
boat costs 1.2 million. We have a grant, we expect a grant of 900,000. So
Yeah.
the cost of the city would be 300,000. That's
Yeah.
in here. But we don't spend the 300,000 if we don't get the grant.
Got it.
Thank you, John.
Oh, okay. I thought we were.
We increased FY '25 forecast for the outfit of the battalion chief, and the squad truck. That's $40,000. What happened was in 2024, they budgeted, but it did not come in, and that cost was not, by the time the budget was completed, the cost was not added in this FY '25 budget. So they are going to be over by that $40,000. We do have the request from the state aid committee to increase, I'm sorry, this is different. The increased beach preservation I'm going to actually let Douglas talk about these next couple of items. For the $50,000, it went from 25 to 75?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to let Douglas chime in with these projects.
Yes, so the next two lines, what we're calling the supplemental work on the breach inlet end, we are doing, those costs are below what we anticipated on that end. We would like, if you all are agreeable, to include or add, including vegetation on the new dune. That's coming as a recommendation from Stephen. Currently, we have $25,000 in our budget, and it is a matching fund. So the idea there is if a resident wanted to vegetate their dune, we would match their contribution and basically split that cost. We know that would result in kind of a patchwork of a vegetated dune. So what we would propose is, instead of that $25,000, the city go up to 70, increase $50,000 to go to $75,000, and we just include that amount for the city to vegetate that new dune. This would be, again, offset by, we are not spending, and I don't know the exact amount that we're not spending, but we're spending less on the shoal management, the supplemental work than we anticipated and got approved.
So we're no longer asking the homeowners to contribute 50%.
That's correct.
But that would put vegetation along that
The
entire strip.
entire strip, so that would, the way, kind of sequence would be, we're doing that work now. We actually started it yesterday, so we would build the dune now. We would pause for the summer, it gets busy, but then that would give us time during the summer months to get, and it would be a landscaping company to come back in the fall, which is the proper time to plant that material anyway, and just plant the entire dune at that time. That's the first one. The next one is, it's a little more complicated. This is, if you will recall, we had in our budget a $350,000 placeholder, and we called that the inlet management project. The idea behind that was if we found that there was work that needed to happen in Breach Inlet, we would have kind of this placeholder of $350,000 to adjust the inlet somehow. That was in this coming up fiscal year. We have not heard anybody say that work is needed. So we are proposing that come out. But what we would ask that you consider, and you'll recall that Stephen talked to council, I think it was in this December meeting, about the feasibility of groins on the northern end of the island. The idea behind the groins is they would be done at the same time as a beach nourishment project, and the purpose of those groins would be to hold that sand in place for longer. So in theory, they would be designed to, after you do a renourishment, they would keep that sand from flowing down the island at the same rate that it would without the groins. So it makes that project a more durable project, get more value out of that project. So if we're looking for kind of long-term savings, we would suggest that the city consider, instead of the $350,000 in the inlet, include the design work to design those groins in this upcoming fiscal year, to be in a position to be able to potentially build them with the new, when we do the major renourishment, which is planned in '27.
How much are those groins, the
So-
groins themselves?
So we expect they would be about $1 million apiece,
And how many?
and we think there would be between either three or four.
So
So we're looking at an additional $4 million in fiscal year '27, but we expect that there would be a rate of return by keeping the sand, that you wouldn't do it unless you determined that the effect of those groins would be to preserve the project, and over the life of the project, save money in renourishment costs.
It would hopefully slow the rate of the downstream drift of sand.
Correct.
I thought there was a considerable amount of back work that had to be done to show that that's, because it's frowned upon by
Yeah,
the state
so what we've,
and
what
all other
we've been,
organizations.
what we've been told is that you have to, that the state would not authorize those unless you can show that there is a chronic erosional problem that's putting property and people in danger. And we think that we have that condition specifically at Dunecrest and Beechwood East. The idea has been bantered around about terminal groins, which is the same thing, but at the end of the islands. We don't know, we don't think that we have enough of a track record that shows we're kind of critically erosional to justify those, but we believe that we are kind of have a long track record in those areas and that we would be successful in getting authorization for them in those specific areas. So this would be this would be the initial step, would be putting this placeholder in the budget for consideration in the next fiscal year to do. There has to be a downdrift analysis. I mean, there's a lot of legwork that would need to be done and submitted to get them authorized, but this would be that first step.
For 27, correct?
The design would happen fiscal year '26, construction would happen in fiscal year '27.
Right.
You want to do it with the.
You want to do it with the renourishment because there's a requirement that when you build them, you immediately have to cover them and have the sand, have the groins that are catching the sand all the way out to the end of the groin, so that in theory, it's letting the sand drift off of it at the same rate as it would have before they were there.
All right, and where does Wild Dunes fit into this? Is there a conversation going on with them?
No, this is the absolute first step in the discussion. So before, before these were to be actually designed, authorized, there would need to be some level of conversation with I would say, not only the community association, but you have a stretch of property owners there that would be, they would have these new groins adjacent near their homes. So I think there'd need to be some conversations before we kicked off and hired a designer to do this.
Okay, let's call it planning and design then, so that there is a discussion before we start the design. The second thing is, what about cost sharing with this? Is this going to be 100% public funds or a mix?
That's yet to be determined. I mean,
Okay.
I think it would be reasonable to say it would be cost shared. That would be,
To
I
be
think-
determined, though.
yeah, to be determined, but I would think that because we're cost sharing in the large scale renourishments, the reason we would be doing this would be to make those last longer.
Okay.
So in my opinion, it would be a situation that we would want to cost share on.
But it will be a process between the Wild Dunes Community Association, the resort, and
Yeah, I think we
the
definitely
city.
would want their feedback on this.
I guess I'm a little confused with the numbers, though. This is showing a $202,000 decrease in spending.
That's correct.
It's not an increase, so what's coming out, what's going in?
That's that inlet, the inlet project that was kind of put in there is 350,000, and the number's a little, it's not a round number, I don't,
'Cause
looks like 202, there's something else in there.
187,000 that we had in there for,
Shoal management?
was it show management?
That's the
Is
same
that
number.
coming in this year instead of, I don't know.
Oh, was that in next year? Maybe that's in, no,
That was carried over. Part of it, that 187 was carried over.
oh, so that work, so the other part of this is, we were anticipating the supplemental work that's being done by Collins now to be done as the Army Corps project progresses down the beach and to span across both fiscal years. And that's not going to be necessary. There's going to be enough sand there now where Collins can build the entire supplemental dune now, so there would not be a need to do that work next fiscal year.
So how much is this growing, I'm trying to get down, how much is the actual growing permitting work?
150,000.
150,
150.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm-
And
if I look at-
350 would be coming out,
187 is
187,
coming out.
Changed to 20, I believe.
there is a,
Coordination.
where is the
It's,
actual cell?
it's three,
What page?
Nourishment permitting is 300, and additional borings, the US ACE coordination's 20, groin permitting's 150, ongoing monitoring of the shoreline's 100. Yeah, I had a question, because it looks like from where we were. in our
Which page you on?
I'm on 50,
Capital.
89,
89.
89 in the bottom corner.
So
On the right.
I think professional fees was originally like $700 and some $1,000, and now it's like 507. So that's the difference.
Well, the one we reviewed in the committee in February, we were at 695,000, and now we're up at 855, so it looks like a cost increase, unless there were some other shifts between that, I don't. So
Is that draft 2 that you're looking at?
I'm looking at the draft from what we approved in the committee to where we are on draft 3, so there might have been some puts and takes, but I don't see those in the reconciliation pages. Unless I might have missed them. So, look, yeah, we may need to just kind of revisit that, or see what that 202 is. That's a decrease, right?
Pull up your, do you have your
That's a
email?
decrease, John? Yeah.
It is a decrease. Please, can you pull up your email the lines that you changed? The one that you sent me?
This could take a while. Pull up that email.
The other thing, if we're putting the permits in here, shouldn't we add the permit would be with the intention to put the groin in, should we account for that cost in the?
And 27?
Yeah, I think we ought to put it in here, because it'll impact the fund balances one way or the other, yeah.
I mean, these are just placeholders, though. We're not
We would
moving
be,
forward with this.
yeah, we would be very much guessing at the number and cost, but we could
So
certainly
like just
plug in a best
the
guess.
concept, we're not.
We're not approving it.
That's
Agreeing or
correct.
approving any groins on the beach.
That's
Right.
correct. We would not want to even have the conversations unless council was, unless we had the,
Well, or should we go
Money
the other way
allocated
and
to-
kind of hold it out of the budget until we do get a review and approval? That would,
We're just talking about planning and design at this point.
that's correct.
Yeah, but we don't want to spend 150 grand if we're not going to do it. I mean,
that's
if
kind of
there's not
right,
an
yeah.
interest in
It's
it,
either is or,
we're going to throw away 150,000 if we don't want to do it.
could we maybe have Steve come in and talk to us at the council meeting and give us a little bit more on
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, and you could, I think it would be,
And
if we wanted to do it with the renourishment, we would need to we would need to spend this money in in the upcoming fiscal year. If council is of a mind to look at funding the design with it being outside of budget, we could certainly do it. We could take it out with the understanding that we'll consider it
We're not
out.
approving spending the money. here.
That's
We're putting
correct.
it in. So there has to be some other conversation and vote around
That's
council
correct.
to spend it. We're just budgeting for it, whether we do it or not. We haven't
Right.
voted on it yet.
That's
That's
correct.
correct.
But I do think if you're gonna put it in here from budgeting purposes, that you should also put the corresponding expense down to show that if we do this, here's the impact of the 27.
Yeah, and we definitely wanted to just have this conversation with you today before we kind of went all over the place in the budget, but I would agree, if council is kind of agreeable to considering it being built in 27, we would go ahead and put it in there.
I think we should put the placeholder personally in and budget it and have a conversation about it soon.
So that's an additional $5 million to FY '27. 5 or 4?
I think it's an additional 4.
4 million.
the other thing, I know we've been kind of kicking the can down about these discussions with Wild Dunes, but, even like on the shoal management project, we're paying, the city's paying all of the engineering and permitting. We're paying all the emergency, and I just don't know what what are we sharing and what aren't we sharing? And I think that's just a conversation we probably need to have going forward sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Because here's another 150 that, if it's going to that project, should we be kind of nailing this down
Yeah,
with
I mean,
the,
the engineering side of things is getting more and more expensive. And,
It's very
you know,
expensive.
I feel like this is, this is just the way we've always done it, but, we're spending a ton of money on, that we're not even asking for cost sharing.
Right. Yeah, and
I
I,
don't understand why, like, why would you share in a project and not share in the planning of the project?
They need to be asked.
It's-
They haven't been asked.
That's, I think at every board meeting, I think I say the same thing. I don't know why we're not having the conversation, or if we are,
I think we need to figure out how we're going to have that conversation, who's going to have it, because I'm just kind of confused as to what's happening. And what, you know, we as a council haven't either discussed what we want shared or what our policy is going to be, and to take it to Wild Dunes, it seems like it's just conversations are happening, but I haven't got a clue what's happening.
yeah, I think that
And
was.
I think this has to be done in the light of day, yeah.
Yeah, I think, to kind of everybody's point, that the design and the permitting has just always fallen to the city historically, so I think that's why it's in here the way it is, but if there's a desire to change that, certainly can have that conversation.
Well, our engineering costs are hitting seven figures. I mean, it's getting, they're not immaterial.
yeah.
Yes.
This isn't just throwing sand on a beach.
And I think the other thing going forward too is, in the past, we have had sufficient funds to pick up the planning and design cost ourselves. Going forward, we may not have as much money
Well,
available.
and,
But you don't plan and design something if you're going to ask somebody else for money without including them in the planning.
That's a very good point
Absolutely.
to that side of it too, yeah. I mean, you don't want
It's a joint effort.
too many cooks in the kitchen, I guess, but you also, they need to have a say as to what's happening.
You don't come to them and say, here's your share of the
Right,
money,
yeah.
of the cost, without having.
yeah, and it's a different, if the city were, to, and we haven't had the conversation yet, to your point, if the city were to shift to historically, the city was contributing much less to the projects and much more to the design. I think we're talking about potentially changing that sharing arrangement for the projects. So I think it would make sense if we're sharing more, we're sharing more toward the projects, that we would share less in the design to make it an equitable share in all of it.
But you got to show them the numbers.
Yeah, and I think the Shoal Management Project was I'm glad it was not a big project, but I think it gave us the indicator of some of the weaknesses we have in sort of the understandings. Because like I said before, if I was Wild Dunes and we came in and, we were 25% over on our estimate, and they've been budgeting based on what the numbers we gave them, I understand their position that they're taking, but that's why I think it's important, even if we do get into a cost share, is that going to be a fixed cost share? Is it going to be a dollar fixed, or is it going to be a percentage fixed? So if things change, everybody's moving together. I don't think we have the answers to those, and that's the conversation I think that needs to be had.
That's a larger discussion we need to have in full council going forward. For the purpose of this is just a placeholder, right?
Yes,
225.
yeah. Yeah, and I think we had,
The
I think we
budget.
had this in the last workshop, this cost share discussion. I think we had anticipated that at the last budget workshop, and you all decided to not have it at that point. So tell us, we'll just work to schedule it. And
I think a committee needs to meet first, a smaller committee of some sort, whether it's the public facilities or something with the Wild Dunes and the resort,
Others in the facilities.
to start the discussion. And then bring it to council. Nothing gets decided with 9 people, with the 9 of us.
Well, we need to make a decision because the time's running out.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do?
Agree with you there.
Well, let's put it on the agenda,
For public
public
facilities.
facilities, and see if we can ask Wild Dunes how many people, whoever it is, that need to meet, and see if we can actually sit down and talk about this.
Yep.
It's the community association that is, I think, the main source of the funding that we're asking for, and then the resort, because they might contribute as well, so just bring them in.
What other budget highlights do you have, Deborah?
The $908,000 that was moved in draft 2 to the Capitol, added to the Marina Fund to increase their fund balance. We received a new contract for the 4th of July. That contract increased by $6,000 for FY 2026. The So originally, I had the allocation, I'm sorry, this is new. So the pickleball lights that was discussed in the committee meeting. This is anticipation that council will approve this as presented from the committee. So that would be an additional cost to this FY '25 budget of $36,000. '25 was budgeted and is over by $36,000. That's on the agenda, and Carrie will explain that a little bit further. So in doing that, we kind of move some allocations around from the money is coming from the recreation fund, and we had the tennis courts kind of coming from the recreation fund for FY '26. So we kind of moved some funding around, which netted to zero. So overall, we're looking at a fund balance of $52 million, $52.2 million and for FY '26, we're anticipating revenue of $32 million and expenses. This is page 55 of your spreadsheet.
Thank you.
$32 million and expenditures of $30 million. For net income of $2.5 million, and that's 25% higher than FY '25's budget.
The projected ending fund balance is higher than projected beginning
That is correct,
by that amount.
by about 4,
2
Is it-
point,
This will help us build up for the renourishment and all. Yeah.
It drops quick.
It drops pretty quick next.
yeah, next year it drops.
yeah, but this year we're talking
Yeah,
about.
this year
Yeah, we're gonna need the money. Quick item, we talked about the payroll a little bit. It does look like, and I'd kind of gone back to even a couple of years before this,
Which page?
I'm sorry, I'm on the payroll, yeah, the page that.
Which page?
I don't have the page number on it.
53,
53.
On mine.
page 53 is page 6 on Scott's.
So we added the payroll as a percentage of the general fund revenues. And back in, I think it was 22, 21 or whatever, it was 55%. And if you just kind of go across that, we're now growing, this is with the increased revenue, we're still going from roughly 69% up to almost 80% in just a few more years. So the trend line hasn't been turned. Our costs are chewing up more and more of the general fund, and it seems like although we've added a little bit more revenue, we're not keeping pace. And, the other thing that I'd like to mention is we continue to budget a 2.5% payroll increase year after year after year after year. And again, I went back historically, and we've had just some recent years where we've had upwards of 20% payroll increases. They're tracking at 5%, 6%, and I'm not sure, I think it's been 5 or 6 years since we've had actually a 3% increase. So I think, what I would suggest is that we take this, if we're going to not do 2.5%, let's not budget the 2.5%. Let's budget what we think it's really going to be, because that is going to impact our payroll costs, and we're going to have to plan to cover those payroll costs. I think otherwise we're just fooling ourselves. And like even this last year, we budgeted 3%, and we're doing 5.5%. So my request would be, let's put in what we really believe those payroll increases are going to be, and then we can address the revenue issues that are going to come along with that.
And the challenge is always predicting the CPI. Would you say
We're not
5?
using CPI. We use 4.5, 5. I mean, we've been, the last few years, we have not been below 5. So
Just use 5?
I just think for planning purposes, if that's what's happening, then we better budget for it, and then we're going to have to figure out the revenue side of it to keep covering these increases. It would be a more realistic view, and I think it would be best for us to deal with the realistic view as opposed to not dealing with the realistic view.
So what do you think it's going to be for '26, the increase?
We've already got it budgeted at 5.5.
5.5.
Right, so we have a beginning fund balance, all the funds, and the ending fund balance, and that goes up a little over $2 million.
But Jimmy, look at a year out when we have the beach renourishment.
We know,
We're gonna have
we
to-
need to discuss that, yes, but we're talking about this year.
So I'll look.
Talking about the next 5 years.
So I can increase the payroll percentages to 5%, just to be conservative, and council can decide whether they want to do a cost wage study next year, not next year, 2027, to see where we truly land, to see if we're still in that percentage. But this year, we did do a 3%. FY '25, we did a 3% instead of the,
All right.
I can't remember, what did we budget?
4333.
That was the budget. So we should be okay for this year. But for future years, I can.
It's the out years I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You got the 5.5 in
Yeah.
there for this year, the COLA and the merit.
So for future years, we're, just so I can make sure that I understand what I'm doing here. So for FY '26, do we have any changes that we need to address? These are just future years.
These are future years.
We're looking at increasing the payroll and adding the $4 million for
The growing.
the growing. Okay.
And I know we're in the process of this, and maybe it's just, we get two scenarios of what happens to the fund balances, but I think it would be helpful for us to take a look at what if the price of this renourishment, I sent that thing around, we're way down here at the $15 level. Everybody else is coalesced in the $22 per cubic yard or $23. I'd like to see what that does to us. If we were actually within the market rates that are actually in process right now. I know Hilton Head's at, their upper range is at 22, lower range is around 20, and I would just like to see a scenario to plug in, what does it do to our requirements for funding if we use the $22 per cubic yard for sand instead of the $15.34 that we have right now.
So, and that was a very useful deck that you sent around, and I think it was definitely interesting.
That's a good
And kind of eye-popping.
It's
to
just
see
that
what-
right-hand plot,
Yeah.
yeah, you gotta get a look at that one.
Scatter diagram.
Yeah, no, it was
We were kind of over here. yeah.
very useful. I did, and I think you all probably know that Nicole Elkos, who's the Beach Advocates kind of director, her husband is local and works for one of the major dredging operations, and he's in on every one of these bidding kind of operations, and we have access to him. We also have, a lot of those projects were done by Great Lakes. They've done projects. They did our last big project. They did a number of the projects on the sheet. And we've had an initial conversation with Nicole Elko's husband about, just kind of the market and the volatility of the market. And he does have some very interesting kind of comments and theories on what will happen. So I think it's good that we have those conversations with a handful of people to kind of understand what is going on here in the last couple of years. And again, kind of with the beach that we're trying to guess here, is this the new normal that do we have to plan on losing as much sand as we've lost in the last 3 or 4 years, or so there's a lot of kind of art to the guesswork of doing this, but he is at least a local resource that we have a connection to that's very plugged in to every one of the prices, and he knows the details of each of those projects and why the prices
Yeah,
came in.
they're probably not, admittedly, they're not apples to apples,
Yeah.
I'm sure, but, I just wanted to try to get, when you look at it in its totality, it just looks like we're off.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I guess my take on this is if we're gonna go, we're gonna have to ask for assistance from somewhere to get that project done. I don't know how we do it otherwise without decimating our fund balances of the
Right.
city. I'd like to know what that number, if we can get a good number, and then we'll know what to ask for. If we
Right.
go in and ask for 10 short, then that's what we're going to get, that's what we're
Right.
going to get.
Deborah, to continue on with this year? You have everything?
That's everything I have, unless
Any
someone
other
else has some
questions,
questions.
comments, from anyone?
One comment on that, Douglas, I think you responded when Scott sent that out also that some of these projects are tied to USACE.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that there was a significant difference.
Yeah, we do, I mean, we have always known that when the projects are federal, that they, and we have been shocked at that. We see the prices coming in for a Folly Beach project that seems to be very similar to ours. And I've never fully understood it. I've heard, well, it's a federal project, so they have to deal with the Davis-Bacon Act and a lot of federal requirements that they don't have to deal with when it's not a federal project. Does not seem to me, that it should double the cost of projects, but it seems to have that effect. So that certainly is a contributor when it's a federal project versus not being a federal project.
And
Well, the
with
federal
Folly-
government certainly has a reputation for paying more than
Yeah,
Right.
what something's actually worth.
Right.
You could get in the private sector.
Yeah, and we've
yeah.
we've had our eyes open with just this little project
Yeah,
here.
Folly Beach is 100% federally funded too, right? They're a unique
That's correct.
situation, so.
Yep,
And
that's
we
correct.
talk about, they love the Corps because the Corps does the work basically for them for free.
That's correct.
Well, they were the least cost on the chart, just FYI.
Yeah,
Okay, item C, I think we've already discussed that. I'm going to put it out there, see if anyone has any further comments.
so,
we-
we're going to 6C
Yeah.
Ordinance.
on the agenda, so I would just kind of forecast that we are hoping to have first reading, so to kind of keep on our schedule of having the budget ratified in time, we would hope to have first reading at the end of April, a public hearing in May, and second reading in May, ready for the end of our fiscal year in June. So that's the timing that we have. Because this budget contemplates revenue increases from increasing building permits and business licenses, we are planning to have a complementary ordinance that would make those changes at the same time. I would tell you that, and I don't know that we've fully figured out how this will play out in terms of the revenue, but the municipal association is advising that when we change our revenue, our business license rates, that we do that at a renewal period. So right now, we are in that renewal period, and probably half of the businesses have already renewed. It would be improper for us to change right in the middle of that business license cycle. So we would do this in anticipating of people who renew in the upcoming renewal period to pay at the new rate. So everybody's license year that they're paying for right now, it would be consistent for this entire license year, and then the change would take place for their upcoming license.
A year from now.
Pretty much a year from
So
now.
it still shows up in FY '26, but it's not going to hit FY '25.
That's correct. And not all of it, so we will have a lot of them renewed, but there will be some lag. There'll be a handful that come in between now and the renewals that start coming in, around February. So there'll be some effect of that, those that come in.
So what would we have, a January 1 date for that?
Well,
Meeting January.
the ordinance will stipulate that the rate change is effective, and our license year number is different from our fiscal year number, so it would say, the license change rate is effective for any license year 26 licenses, so any upcoming licenses. So all of license year 25s will be at the same rate as we currently have. Okay.
And it normally is May 1st is a new license year.
Yeah, they're renewing now, but they're actually effective May 1st.
All right.
The third part of that, just to keep making it more complex, that we are required to do a classification adjustment every 2 years. That's part of the state law that we have to adjust based on the profitability of different businesses. So we are required to do that. We don't have to do it at the same time, but we have to do that by the end of this year. I would say that if we have to do it and we're changing business license ordinances already, that we also include it. So we'd have 3 different ordinances kind of going through at the same time. The budget, the increase in the licenses and permits, and then this reclassification that we're required to do. So we're trying to get all of those lined up for first reading at the end of this month, second reading in May.
Very good.
Okay?
Moving on to item 7, procurement.
Thank you, Deborah.
Discussion of pickleball court lights, $60,650 for Musco Sports Lighting. And you can read where it's coming from, it's 25 budget, hospitality fund 25,000, recreation building fund 35,650. And that's on page 109 to 112 of the packet. And did you have something for us, Carrie?
And not unless you guys have questions. Just-
Deborah spoke to this a little bit, but
Yeah.
that we budgeted 25, the cost came in at 60,650. We would like for this purchase to be made as a sole source purchase based on the fact that all of the existing lights at the facility are the same brand. It's the only brand that has the warranty, the 25-year warranty that these lights do, and they are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They just come out, they see in the dashboard if a light goes out, they just show up, replace them. But we have that control panel in place. These would tie into that existing control panel. And the last 2 times these purchases have been made, they've also been done as a sole source procurement. So we're requesting that as part of this purchase. The overage, it's $35,000 more than budget. This was contemplated to come out of the recreation building fund. And that does have an impact on and there was an adjustment that Deborah talked about.
Correct.
That money was planned to be allocated, I think, to the
To a
tennis
tennis
court.
court project.
So we'll have to make that adjustment in the budget, which was covered by Deborah.
And so what you all saw today, it was adjusted for that.
These are the pickleball courts that also are tennis courts?
No, these are the dedicated 2 pickleball courts that are located at 27th and Hartnett.
How late are they open?
So right now, our facility's open till 10. The tennis court and basketball lights are on a timer until 10. The pickleball lights could be the same. We'll acknowledge there is usually a noise issue that comes along with pickleball, so we might back that down to 9. But we have total control over that. And so.
You can time the lights.
We can time the lights.
All right.
So, but that was one of the, talked about both of those times in the facilities meeting.
Seems like there was some discussion in committee too about surveying the immediate neighbors, talking to them a little bit about the impact of what lights are.
So I would say that Musco Light, this is one of the things that they definitely focus on, and with our location and where we are, this would be one of the companies that I would recommend for that. They control sky glow to make sure there's not as much light pollution, and they really take the time to focus in on the playing area only. Our lights that we had before, especially on the soccer field, prior to 2016, our neighbors complained every time we turned those lights on for every game that we had.
Well, they were right
Since
in
moving to
their, right
like-
in their houses.
Right, yeah, they said they shined right through.
They did.
Since moving to Musco, we haven't had one issue, one complaint.
Technology's much better now.
I think, Rusty, that conversation also was around the noise of the pickleball.
The noise.
That goes along with it, yeah.
So, but again, we want to be good neighbors and good stewards, and if we find out that's too late, it's very easy for us to back it down. And if we can extend that playing time for that population that likes to play,
I don't think they're gonna fuss between 9 and 10. They're gonna be happy to have lights that they can play an extended time. There's not always that fight for, we can only play on the tennis courts when it's dark outside. We're just enhancing playing capabilities of our facility.
What time are they open in the morning?
7. Or first light.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Carrie.
Yep.
We'll move on to capital projects update.
Yes.
First one is drainage.
Yep. The one we've been kind of focusing on here, as you will recall, we're been at a pause with the flood barrier project that was contemplated to be done in coordination with the Wild Dunes Golf Course renovation. We've had a lot of conversations between the city staff and the Lowe staff. We think that there is a path forward that would alleviate the ownership's concern, and that would be for, to try to get each of the adjacent owners to sign a release, releasing Wild Dunes of any liability, if any. Before we went, so we are planning to go through that effort. There's between 20 and 30 property owners that we would need to approach, get a release from. Before we make that effort, we just want to be sure that it will be satisfactory to the ownership, so they are kind of running that back up the flagpole to the ownership to be sure that we don't go through the effort and then we still have a roadblock. So they have a meeting, an internal meeting tomorrow. We're hopeful to get a kind of final answer on whether that is a viable path forward shortly after their meeting. So,
Talk to the owners, the homeowners?
no, we have not. We would, so if this is the path forward, that will be, and you will recall the effort of getting easements from the oceanfront owners down here on Ocean Boulevard. It would be a very similar process where we would need to have a series of meetings, have a series of, what would have the documentations drawn up, provide those to each owner, and just see what the success rate is. I think that I don't think there would be a viable project unless 100% of the adjacent owners were agreeable to it. If that is, an agreeable path forward to the ownership. So that would be our next steps.
How many homes?
Between 20 and 30, we would need some of the adjacent homes have natural protection, and they won't actually have a berm behind them. So we'll need to kind of verify that we're approaching the right pool of owners, but it's somewhere between 20 and 30.
I'd suggest too that maybe you look at segments of the project. If you get all of the homeowners agreeing in one area, but not all the area, and it's in a location where you can just
That's
sort of
right.
skip some
Yeah,
houses.
so there are 2 basins
Yeah.
kind of covered by that stretch, and
Okay.
it could be, in theory, that one basin gets protected to the higher level and the other one doesn't, so.
Okay,
We'll-
thank you.
We will analyze that based on the response. We're hopeful, from our perspective, this is adding a new drainage system where there is not one at all currently, and it's adding a flood barrier to those properties that don't have it otherwise, and the alternate plan would be putting that barrier on the other side of their house, so they would be left out of the protection. So we've been convinced that there's not a liability and that it's only a benefit to those owners, so we would hope that they would see it that way as well. Any questions on that project? The next are pretty quick, I will say.
Actually, what's the timing? I know there's obviously timing constraints.
Right.
Like, what is our, drop dead date on?
So they haven't given us a drop dead date. I will say that the contractor doing the work has been very, we were initially told that the work should happen in the front part of their process, so we thought that it should be happening now. They have organized their work out there where they have said it would not make a huge impact if they pivoted and did it closer to the end of their project. So we don't have a ton of time, but I think we at least have a month or two to get all of this worked out, to still be able to participate in their project. Palm Boulevard, the drainage project that would provide drainage between 38th Avenue and 41st Avenue. Thomas and Hutton is doing this design. They have submitted all of the permit requests. They're now getting comments back. I know that this week they've been responding to the DOT with comments. So they're back and forth trying to secure permits. We do anticipate this construction happening in the fall of 2025. And there's a typo here, the IOP Marina Public Dock and Green Space, this project is really tied to the dock is obviously finished, but the green space is tied to the parking of the marina tenants. Those marina tenants are going to be first invited to the next public facilities committee meeting, along with the engineer, Matt Klein. So that was talked about a little bit by the public facilities group, and they've agreed to have that group come speak with them at their next meeting. Marina dredging, they also have now received their comments back for their federal permit process. They're responding to those comments, and none of the questions were out of what they expected. They were kind of routine comments, and they felt good about being able to respond to those. The IOP County Park Emergency Vehicle Access Path, that is nearing completion now. They are adding landscaping, but about 90% complete there and just finishing up. Still have not executed the MOU with them. You will approved a version and went back to them. We still haven't heard back one way or the other from them on that. 88 beach paths and the other beach paths, 26, 36, 46, and 52nd are all complete. And if you are agreeable, I'll strike this for the next report as completed work. Beach maintenance and restoration, there's obviously been a lot of work happening there. We have one contractor that has been kind of moving sandbags as rapidly as he can, as he's been able to. He has had some delays, but he is moving the sandbags from the Breach Inlet end to the Beechwood East area. And I'm sure you all have been made aware, but that Beechwood East area has been unfortunately hit hardest, here in the last 2 weeks than it really has in all of these months that we've been dealing with it. We had some high surf 2 weeks ago. We had new slabs collapse that had been standing prior to that event. So we have done some emergency scraping, adding sandbags. We felt like the shoal management work was going to give them the protection that they needed in time to keep, this from happening. But unfortunately, they have sustained some additional damage here in the last few weeks. So the bags are being moved actively now. The shoal management contractor, we've executed that agreement with S.J. Hamill. We have entered into an agreement with the Community Association in terms of reimbursement. They are mobilizing today, and they will start actually moving sand tomorrow. So that project will be underway as of tomorrow. Lot of moving parts there with that project.
Any word on whether the sandbags can stay?
So the sandbags will stay for at least 6 months.
Yeah,
So
we were waiting on permission for that or something?
Yes.
We got
Yeah,
permission?
got that.
Yes, we have that permission. So they will be there, and they'll allow us to, just see how effective the shoal is in providing that protection. The only other update on the beach comes in the Breach Inlet end. The Army Corps project they have completed, you'll recall that Sullivan's Island kind of donated the last part of their material site to our beaches, so they have now pumped sand from the Intracoastal onto our beaches, as well as the material that was originally slated for Sullivan's Island onto our beaches. They are now mobilizing to the spoils area that was originally dedicated to us. So that, they're anticipated to resume pumping on Thursday. They've been transitioning the material from one spoil site to the other here for about the last week. They've been extending the pipes up from Second Avenue to Third Avenue, so they will be in the Third Avenue area pumping starting Thursday. And in the meantime, the city's contract, Robert Collins, they started yesterday with moving some of that newly pumped sand and constructing the berm adjacent to those properties on Ocean Boulevard. They're starting in the 900 block to try to get, because they're taking the sand pumped onto Second. They're running, and there's a pretty long run to get from Second to Ninth. They're trying to get that work out of the way soonest before the beach gets as crowded as it will. So they're going down there now. They'll be working their way back towards Breach Inlet.
When does turtle season start?
May, I believe.
May
Yeah,
1st, yeah. Yep, so they're, that work should be close, if not completed, by turtle season. Obviously, the dredge work is going to be continuing into turtle season. And that contractor will need to, they need to coordinate turtle inspections and the protocol that they need to take during turtle season. So a lot happening on the beach. Any questions there? These other projects, hasn't been much in terms of updating. City Hall renovation, you will recall that's been primarily paused until 2 years out. Undergrounding power lines, no progress to report there. SCDOT Palm Boulevard bikes, pedestrian paths, no update there. 21st Avenue extension, sidewalk and repair and extension. We did hear from Charleston County that they are scheduled to have bids back May 1st. They had told us previously that the work would be done by Memorial Day. They're now saying that it will not be completed by Memorial Day, but they will make it such that their work will not be disruptive to vehicular traffic. They can keep that work out of disrupting the lane of traffic. So that should be happening very soon.
Okay, moving on to the ninth item, strategic plan, policy, initiatives, and priorities. You have livability, environmental, public services, personnel.
Yep, on personnel, I just wanted to update the council. We had a resignation from Bob Miller, who is a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals. He was having health concerns. He has since been kind of given a clean bill of health and feels up to resuming his responsibilities as a Board of Zoning Appeals member, so he is asked to be considered to be reappointed. So we would have that on your agenda for consideration at the end of this month. The only other thing on the agenda is update on the seasonal parking passes, and we just had a meeting. John, you want to?
Yeah, we've talked about two things. One is doing some kind of or an hourly parking arrangement for after 4 p.m. In the lot and on an hourly basis, and then doing a seasonal pass. We've asked the PCI for some additional information that they're going to bring to the May 4th, May 6th, something like that meeting. And then we'll make a recommendation to bring the workshop in May and then vote at the, hopefully at the council meeting in May.
Very good. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any other business to discuss at this workshop. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.